The film begins with an elderly female patient experiencing difficulty breathing. She asks for more oxygen, but instead a young and attractive nurse named Gwen turns off the oxygen supply and squeezes the air tube, cutting off the patient's air entirely. The patient's heartbeat stops as a result, but Gwen fakes a panic and calls a code blue to summon the doctors. While the doctors work to resuscitate the patient, Gwen stands by the door with a sinister smile, revealing her psychopathic nature. Fortunately, the doctors manage to save the patient's life. Watching the scene unfold, Gwen walks away, seemingly satisfied with her actions. The story then shifts to a peaceful household where a small family lives. Mira, the wife, is preparing breakfast for her husband, Todd. Their son, Max, who has muscular dystrophy and uses crutches to move around, joins them and mentions having issues with his legs. Mira becomes concerned, since Max often goes up and down the stairs on his own, but Todd reassures her, saying it's nothing to worry about. Gwen, the same nurse from earlier, is revealed to work as Max's caretaker in their home. During breakfast, Max accidentally drops one of his crutches. Gwen helps retrieve it but secretly loosens its tip, ensuring it will cause him to fall later. After breakfast, Todd heads to work, and Mira adjusts his suit lovingly. Gwen watches their interaction with jealousy. Once Todd leaves, Mira's friend Karen visits. As they chat, they notice Max and Gwen playing ball outside, seemingly enjoying themselves. During their conversation, Mira confides in Karen about her insecurities, feeling that both Max and Todd favor Gwen over her. Unknown to them, Gwen overhears this. Karen suggests Mira look into hiring another nurse as a replacement, but Mira dismisses the idea, insisting Gwen takes good care of Max. Their conversation is interrupted by Max's scream as he falls. Mira rushes to him and blames Gwen for being careless, but Max defends her, saying the crutch broke unexpectedly while he was walking. Mira contacts Dr. Keller to examine Max and order a new crutch for him. Later that evening, Mira apologizes to Gwen for the earlier incident. Gwen brushes it off, empathizing with Mira's stress as a mother. To help Mira relax, Gwen offers her a specially prepared therapeutic tea, suggesting she rest. The next day, Mira joins a community for people affected by muscular dystrophy. She shares the story of Max, who was diagnosed earlier this year. Max first showed symptoms while climbing a slide. He slipped and fell backward onto the sand. The memory of the incident brings Mira to tears, especially since she witnessed Max's fall the previous day and was deeply shaken by it. When Mira returns home, she is surprised to find Gwen, who appears unexpectedly and offers her some tea. Later, as Mira naps on the sofa, Dr. Keller arrives at the house with a new pair of crutches for Max. However, Gwen prevents Dr. Keller from meeting him. Before leaving, Dr. Keller mentions that she feels she knows Gwen from somewhere, but can't quite remember where. She promises to let Gwen know if she recalls. That evening, Gwen visits Dr. Keller at her home and reveals that she remembers her. As soon as Gwen steps inside, she injects Dr. Keller with a substance, rendering her unconscious. Gwen confesses that they knew each other from their time at the hospital, where Gwen had tried to harm a patient early in the story. She admits that she sees Dr. Keller as a threat to her and her family and plans to eliminate her. Gwen, obsessed with family relationships, sees her actions as justified. Later that night, Mira receives a call from an unfamiliar man named David, who claims to be a member of the muscular dystrophy community she just joined. David tries to build a connection with Mira by sharing that his son, Carter, also has muscular dystrophy. He tells Mira his wife has passed away and that a nurse now helps him care for Carter. Mira, touched by his story, feels reassured in her decision to hire a live-in nurse for her household. However, Mira doesn't realize that David is actually Gwen, who has been using voice-changing software and a fake low-resolution photo to deceive her. One morning, Karen visits Mira's house while Mira is having breakfast with her family. During the visit, Karen accidentally spills a drink on Todd's shirt. Gwen, appearing particularly intrigued by Todd, volunteers to take his shirt to the laundry room. Karen, noticing that Mira looks unwell, offers to fetch her bag from the office room. On her way, Karen happens to glance into the laundry room and catches Gwen smelling Todd's shirt. That night, Gwen, pretending to be David, calls Mira again to inquire about her and Max's well-being. Mira mentions that she isn't feeling well, and David suggests she have her nurse check on her. Shortly after hanging up, Gwen approaches Mira in person, acting as though she overheard the conversation. She accuses Mira of being unfaithful to Todd, claiming she was on the phone with another man. Gwen then speaks privately with Todd, insinuating that Mira might be cheating on him. Despite Gwen's efforts, Todd defends Mira, insisting she's just overworked and tired. Gwen drops the subject for the moment, bids Todd goodnight, and hugs him before leaving. The next morning, Gwen and Todd are in the kitchen while Mira is still asleep. Gwen continues finding excuses to spend time with Todd and even tries to seduce him by touching him. However, her attempt is interrupted when Mira wakes up and enters the kitchen. Gwen, already having made breakfast and taken over the household chores, brushes off the moment. Todd expresses concern for Mira, noting that she often seems exhausted and falls asleep on the sofa. Meanwhile, Karen calls Mira to thank her for the birthday flowers she received, but Mira is confused because she doesn't remember sending any. Karen, worried about Mira's health, suggests she see a doctor. Unknown to Mira, it was actually Gwen who sent the flowers, using the gesture to further manipulate the situation and make Mira appear forgetful. Mira suddenly faints one evening and decides she needs to see a doctor. She asks Gwen to keep this from Todd, but Gwen insists on taking a blood sample to send to the lab herself, citing concern for Mira's health. Later that night, Mira confides in David again, venting about the problems in her home. Shortly after, Todd and Max return, but Mira is busy on the phone. When she tries to take Max to his room, her vision blurs, and she tells him she'll follow him in a moment. As Mira starts to doze off on the sofa, she receives a mysterious message from an unknown sender, warning her that David is a fraud. The next morning, Todd tries to wake Mira, who is still asleep on the sofa, and accidentally sees the message from the previous night on her phone. Both Todd and Max are concerned about Mira's constant exhaustion, with Max questioning why she's been so tired lately. Feeling guilty, Mira apologizes to Gwen for previously misjudging her. Gwen, in turn, expresses happiness, saying she feels like part of the family in the house. However, Mira receives another message warning her about David. Frustrated, she replies, asking the sender to leave her alone. Determined to resume her routine, Mira pushes herself to go to work that day. At the office, she tells Karen that her lab test results came back normal and mentions that Gwen was right. She simply needs more rest. Karen advises Mira to seek a second opinion from a different doctor, someone unconnected to Gwen. However, Mira dismisses the suggestion, trusting Gwen. Soon after, Mira receives an email from David, who warns her that Weber, the person sending her mysterious messages, is trying to slander him. A second email follows, claiming that her child is in danger and asking her to meet at a cafe. At home, Todd overhears Mira talking to Gwen about her plan to meet someone at the cafe. Misinterpreting the conversation, Todd becomes upset, convinced that Mira is having an affair. The next day, Mira goes to the cafe as planned and meets the real David Weber. He explains that he has no children and has never spoken to her before. He also shares that his wife, Laurel, passed away from lung cancer after someone persuaded her to stop chemotherapy and avoid seeing a doctor, eerily similar to what Mira has been experiencing. David then shows Mira evidence, a photo of the person pretending to be him, along with a fake image of the supposed child. Although Mira is stunned by the revelations, she still doesn't suspect Gwen's involvement. Unbeknownst to her, Todd has followed Mira to the cafe and sees her hugging David. Meanwhile, back at the house, Karen visits Gwen, bringing Mira a new designer bag and intending to discuss the strange occurrences in the household. Karen confronts Gwen, revealing that she saw her smelling Todd's shirt. She warns Gwen to stop interfering with the family or face consequences. As Karen is about to leave, Gwen strikes her from behind, rendering her unconscious. Gwen then transports Karen to an unknown location, where she injects her with a substance before abandoning her in her car. Later, Mira is at home preparing dinner when she receives a text from Todd saying he'll be home late. Gwen returns with Max after his physical therapy session. While Mira is distracted, Gwen secretly takes a knife from the kitchen, claiming she needs to leave to meet an old friend. It turns out Gwen goes to David's house, revealing that they know each other. She had learned the location from Mira and was once the nurse for David's wife before her death. Gwen was the one who advised David's wife to stop her cancer treatment. At David's house, Gwen stabs him with the knife she took from Mira's kitchen and pours blood around his body to stage the scene. She then takes his bag and leaves. Later that night, Todd comes home drunk, frustrated by the growing tension with Mira. Gwen seizes the opportunity to get closer to him. She helps him to his room and attempts to seduce him, but Todd remains loyal to Mira, firmly telling Gwen to leave. The next morning, Gwen greets Todd and falsely claims that he was the one who flirted with her the night before. Meanwhile, Mira wakes up to a text message from David saying he couldn't sleep because his little guy couldn't sleep either. This phrase triggers a memory for Mira. Both David and Gwen have used the same nickname, little guy, when talking about a child. Suspicious, Mira pours out the water in the bottle Gwen had prepared for her and discovers traces of powdered medicine inside. Alarmed, Mira goes into Gwen's room while she's away and finds a book discussing toxins in medicine, along with several hidden medications under the bed. As she processes her discovery, she hears Gwen and Max returning home. Gwen is surprised to see Mira awake, noting that she should still be asleep. Determined to uncover the truth, Mira tries to identify the drug Gwen has been giving her. Gwen, noticing Mira's unease, offers her a drink and suggests she rest more, stating she and Max are heading back to the clinic for his physical therapy. When Mira suggests skipping therapy for the day, Max insists on going because there's a football game at the clinic he doesn't want to miss. Once Gwen and Max leave, Mira returns to Gwen's room and records video evidence of the items she found. Realizing the danger Gwen poses, she calls Todd, explaining that she has gathered proof against Gwen and plans to report everything to the police. Unexpectedly, Gwen returns home earlier than expected, already aware that her actions have been uncovered. Mira, alarmed, demands to know where Max is. Gwen calmly offers to take her to him, and during their journey, she begins to confess her motives. Gwen explains that she had always been treated as an outsider by the patients she cared for, never as part of their families. Her obsession with having a happy family like Mira's drove her to believe the only way to achieve it was by removing Mira from the picture. Meanwhile, Todd returns home and searches for Mira, only to find her phone. He discovers the video she recorded as evidence of Gwen's manipulations and begins to realize the danger Mira is in. Gwen brings Mira to an unfamiliar house and admits to killing those who threatened her idea of family, including Dr. Keller, Karen, and David. Shocked, Mira immediately searches for Max, but quickly realizes Gwen has lied. Max is still at therapy. Gwen admits that her plan was to lure Mira there to eliminate her. She reveals that the knife used to kill David has Mira's fingerprints, as it was taken from her kitchen. Additionally, the blood left at the crime scene was Mira's, taken from the sample Gwen had offered to send to the lab. Panicked, Mira tries to escape, but Gwen blocks her path, leading to a violent confrontation. In the struggle, Mira manages to knock Gwen unconscious with a blow from a teapot. Taking the opportunity, she escapes the house and drives away, determined to reunite with her family. The film abruptly ends with Mira reuniting with Todd and Max, relieved to be together as a family again. However, the story leaves Gwen's fate unresolved, with no indication of what happens to her after the confrontation, leaving the audience with lingering questions about justice and closure.